Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today is going to be a bit of a different one because it's more of a discussion, me just sort of ranting for the most part. I have some stuff written down here, but a lot of it is going to be just me ranting off the top of my head because this is a topic, this is an, I guess, argument that has been going on for a really long time, and I keep seeing a bunch of people saying things that I don't really agree with. I'm very passionate about this, so I don't know how long this is going to end up being, but I just really wanted to get this off my chest and sort of put my 2 cents in about this because, like I said, this is, especially about Ralsei, this is one of the most sort of controversial topics about his character that have been going since the release of the game back in 2018, I think. People have been talking about this. And that is Ralsei's hat, or just, I guess, Ralsei's Chapter 1 design in general. And the fact that by the end of that first chapter, he takes off his hat and he looks completely different. He is the goat monster that we all know and love. But there's a lot of people, even to this day, who still say that they prefer his Chapter 1 design and would go as far as to say as he should be allowed to go back to that design in later chapters after he takes it off. And I just can't agree with that, and there's plenty of reasons why that I'm going to try my best to go into detail on in this video and sort of explain why I think that that is just a bad idea in general. And it has nothing to do with character design preference. You can prefer his Chapter 1 design. I love his Chapter 1 design also. I have a plushie of it. I still draw it frequently. I think that it is really cute, really unique, but there is a very specific reason character-wise why he takes his hat off, and there's a deeper meaning behind just the very existence of Chapter 1 Ralsei that sort of put it in a completely different perspective for me. And though I do miss his Chapter 1 design, and I would admit that, it'd be cool if we got a little bit more of it. The fact that, he takes it off by the end of Chapter 1, which is easily the shortest chapter. You can beat it in 4 hours if you're taking your time even. So, we don't get that much of that design, so I understand why some people would be like, oh, but I like it. Because I do too. But I just want to sort of explain that there is more to this topic than just character design preference, because him taking off his hat at the end of Chapter 1 is actually a very pivotal moment for his character, a very important part of his growth as a character, and I just wanted to sort of try my best to explain why that is, and not really try to change anybody's mind, but just explain that to prefer his Chapter 1 design is one thing, but to want to have him completely revert from his current design, his true design, to his Chapter 1 design simply because you like the other character design more, in my opinion, is not really evaluating the character of Ralsei honestly. That is a very surface level reason to want that change to happen. And that is what I'm going to try and do, is go beneath the surface level and explain why he looks the way he does in Chapter 1, why he looks so different after taking off the hat, and what it really means for his character. And of course, how him, if he was to ever put the hat back on after he takes it off in Chapter 1, that would literally only have negative connotations for his character. It would mean only bad things for him. It would mean a regression in Ralsei as a character in terms of character growth and character progression. It wouldn't be good, basically, and I'm going to try and explain why. So of course, to give a brief explanation as to who Ralsei is one of the three main characters of Deltarune and is known as the Prince of the Dark. He is also the only main character who is a Darkner, a species of beings brought to life through the Dark Fountains, a pillar of pure darkness created by stabbing into the earth and are usually shaped by their hosts. The Dark Worlds, I mean. And Ralsei is one of those manifestations. An interesting thing about that, though, is that Darkners are usually represented by some sort of physical object in the real world, or as the game refers to it, the light world. At this point in the game, 4 chapters in, we still have no idea really what Ralsei's object is, and only have clues to work with. Ralsei being a Darkner ends up being a very important part of his conflict in the later chapters. It seems to me like him being a Darkner is actually something that he isn't the most proud of, because he basically sees himself as not a real living being. He thinks that he is just an illusion. He thinks he's not real. He thinks that because of that, he isn't really allowed to be his own person, be his own sentient being with his own thoughts, his own desires, his own fears, wants, whatever, all that stuff. And so early on, he hides a lot of things about himself. And that is where we get into chapter 1, where it is basically Ralsei at his most distanced from not only other people, but also himself. Because when we first meet Ralsei in chapter 1, he is just completely shrouded in a hood. You know, he doesn't even introduce himself until later. He starts off by talking about Susie and Chris and how, like, they are the heroes, they are the important ones, they are the ones that he is supposed to help. Like, he doesn't really seem to consider himself at the same level as them, and he doesn't think of himself as one of the heroes. Or he does, but he thinks of himself as more of an assistant, I guess. An NPC, if you will, a tutorial, which is basically a lot of what he does in chapter 1. We don't really get a lot of insight into his character in chapter 1. Very intentionally so. People thought that lack of a defined character or personality or progression to the same level as Susie in chapter 1 was evidence that Ralsei was hiding some kind of darker intentions or was evil, which, God, I don't even want to get into that topic right now. I could make a whole video about the Ralsei's evil theory and why it is the stupidest thing. When it was just chapter 1 and chapter 2 even, then I could understand, because there were a lot of suspicious behaviors from Ralsei in those first 2 chapters, but, you know, now chapters 3 and 4 came out, and there's really no excuse anymore, is there? But anyways, yeah, like I said, if I started talking about that, it would be it would put this whole thing just off the rails and into a rant of a whole nother kind. So yeah, basically, when we first meet Ralsei, he doesn't introduce himself. He talks about Susie and Chris. He talks about the legend. He gives his summary of the prophecy, and he doesn't take off that hood until Susie tells him to, which is an interesting detail that I noticed. I don't know if that means anything, but I thought that it could maybe imply that maybe he wasn't even planning on taking that hood off if he wasn't told to. Which might make sense, because in all of the depictions of Ralsei in the prophecy in chapter 4, he is wearing that hood. All of the panels with Ralsei, it never shows what he actually looks like, just him wearing that robe, or I mean that hood. Which doesn't make sense because he takes that off in the first 5 minutes of the game. Or, I guess, for first 5 minutes of meeting Ralsei, not the first 5 minutes of the game. But anyways, yeah, he takes his hood off, and we're finally introduced to his chapter 1 appearance, and it is definitely a very strange design. You know, he has this like all black fur. He has almost no distinct like facial expressions about him. It's difficult to discern a lot of details in his face, and his face is only depicted in like very simple shapes, like his mouth, which is mostly covered by his scarf, by the way, and also like two white dots for eyes. You know, there's no visible nose, eyebrows, ears kind of, pupils. His dialogue sprites use his glasses to try and show a bit more emotion. But yeah, aside from that, it's a very mysterious design, and he also has this weird outfit with the green like robe, the wizard's hat, the heart in the middle, the pink scarf. Like it's a very weird, when you think about it, it is a very weird design. And in his chapter 1 design, he also doesn't have any visible arms. He has them like tucked inside of his clothes. And there's a very good reason as to why his design is sort of like this in chapter 1, where it seems like a lot of points of expression are sort of limited and hidden in his character design. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about that later. Yeah, and that's basically the look, the appearance that we get used to with Ralsei for the entirety of the first chapter. You know, it's obvious that he is some kind of creature, some kind of animal, because he is described as fluffy by a lot of the characters and also save points in the game. So he's not like a human, obviously. But because of the way his design is, it's not really obvious at all at first what he is supposed to be, at least until the end of the chapter, where we get to see the reveal that the design that we have gotten used to up to this point in the first chapter for Ralsei is not actually his true appearance. It's not what he actually truly looks like. Because as Chris and Susie are about to leave the Dark World after defeating the king, Ralsei takes off his hat and reveals that he is actually a goat monster, basically, like other characters that we have seen. Asgore, Toriel, and you know it, Azrael. That's another topic also that sort of irks me, is the connections with Ralsei and Azrael, but again, that's another topic. I could maybe make another video for that, and why I don't like how much the community groups Ralsei and Azrael together still, like they're somehow going to be the same person, or they still want them to be the same person, despite the fact that that would betray a lot of what is going on with Ralsei's current character arc, like the most important part of his story in the game, which is him learning to be his own person. Anyways, near the end of the chapter, he takes off his hat, and we're able to see a lot more details in his face, his just general appearance, and we see that he also has pink horns that were hiding beneath the hat. You know, basically, we're able to see a lot more of what he actually looks like. An interesting thing to note right away first about his design once he takes off the hat is that it's not the only thing that is actually different about him once he takes it off. It's not just that we're able to see, you know, the full features of his face, and also that he has all white fur now, which that is another thing also, is why did he have black fur before he took the hat off? I think that a theory right now is that it's actually shadow. It's not actually the color of his fur, but that doesn't make much sense to me either, though, because you can see that it's not just his face. It is also the rest of his body. He has, like, black fur, so it's like, I don't know, it's weird. It's like maybe some kind of spell that he was using to hide the features of his face and the rest of his body. I don't know what that has to do with the hat, though. Like, again, there's still a little bit of confusion on that part. But anyways, yeah, on top of that, you can see that his outfit is actually a little different also. He now has visible arms and sleeves instead of his chapter 1 design, where it just looked like he had no arms at all, but they were hidden underneath his clothing. The outfit itself looks a little bit different also. It's less torn up. The heart in the center looks a little different. The bottom of his robe is also a little bit higher. It's not as low, which is interesting. And also, his scarf is covering less of his face. He's kind of wearing it more normal in his current design and not like having it like all up covering half of his mouth. So it just seems like in general he is hiding less of himself in his current design as opposed to his chapter 1 design. And that is where we get to the meat of my argument. It's not just his physical appearance where he is showing more of himself in his quote-unquote true design. Well, not quote-unquote, that's just what it is. But him taking off his hat at the end of chapter 1 is a sign of basically increased confidence. He is starting to become more confident in showing more of himself to Chris and Susie, because the entire reason that he is wearing the hat and looks the way he does in chapter 1 is because of a lot of insecurity on Ralsei's part. He is not really sure, because at this point, before he met Chris and Susie, he was completely isolated. He was completely alone. He had never met other people in his life, so he didn't really know what to do, how to act, what he should say, basically all of that. And all he really had to go off of was the prophecy, the legend, his knowledge of that. He was basically afraid of showing himself. So in chapter 1, when we first meet him and he's, spouting all of he's doing this full performance of, you are the heroes of the prophecy, you blah, 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 Delta Warriors or whatever he said, and reciting the prophecy, reciting the legend, all that stuff. It's just an act, a facade. Him wearing the hood, it seems like it's him trying to replicate the way that he looks or is depicted in the prophecy, because he basically thinks that is what he needs to do. Despite whether it's what he wants to do or not, he thinks that he doesn't really deserve to pursue what he wants to do. He thinks that he needs to be exactly what the prophecy says he is, what he's going to do, who he is, all that, because the prophecy was all he knew at first. As he says, when they're about to leave through the great door and into the first dark world, or the fields of hopes and dreams in chapter 1, he believes, it's like, oh yes, we're gonna go through this adventure exactly as foretold by the prophecy, no matter what. And he's basically accepted that he has no free will in that matter, which has sort of left his own self-confidence in a very poor state because of that. And you can tell just by reading his dialogue in chapter 1 compared to even chapter 2 and onwards especially, is that the way he speaks, the way he talks, is not the same. The way that Ralsei is written in chapter 1 and the way that Ralsei is written in chapter 2 and onwards is not the same. Because in chapter 1, it is a lot more of him sort of just projecting this idea of how he needs to act and who he is supposed to be according to the prophecy, whereas in chapter 2 and onwards, he is actually, opening up and being more of himself, like who he actually is. And his chapter 1 design is sort of the physical embodiment of his insecurities. Like, he is hiding so much of himself in his chapter 1 design out of fear that he won't be accepted if he was to show himself. He hides his face because he's afraid that people will not like his true face or like who he really is. So he hides his true face, he puts on that hat, he he hides so much of himself and who he is, not only physically, but also personality-wise. And it's also sort of a case of, in later chapters, he's finally just starting to, like, as he says word for word in chapter 4, he is finally starting to develop his own personality, his own opinions, his own wants, his own fears, because he has Chris and Susie there to sort of be there as like a motivation to do so, I guess. And we can see the difference, because in chapter 1, you know, he doesn't really open up at all. He is just there to sort of tutorialize Chris and Susie, and I guess just sort of make sure that things are coming along the way he thinks they should. You know, he's basically the NPC sidekick in chapter 1. You know, and everything he does, everything he says is related to Chris and Susie in some way, trying to help them, trying to be their guide. He never really takes any kind of time to talk about himself, talk about what he thinks in a situation. He doesn't make his own decisions. And like I said, his chapter 1 design is basically the physical manifestation of him at his most insecure and unsure of himself. You know, doesn't really have any confidence in himself, nor does he really think that he deserves to be his own person. I mean, that sort of perseveres throughout the entire game. It's just a problem that he still has to work with, but that is pretty much what I think is the deeper meaning behind why he looks the way he does in chapter 1, and, you know, the reason why it is so significant for his character when he takes it off near the end of chapter 1 is because it shows that he is starting to become more confident in himself. He is starting to show more of who he really is. It's a sign of confidence. It's a sign of character growth for him. And one of the most significant scenes with Ralsei in chapter 2 being the acid tunnel of love scene basically confirms this. Chris? Hey, Chris. Is it strange to say? It's nice spending time alone with you like this. I'm happy hearing you say that, Chris. When we first met, I was so nervous about first impressions. I even hid my face so you wouldn't see. How do I even be a friend? All I have to do is be nice, is what I thought. But I'm starting to realize being friends is more than that, isn't it? Susie, sometimes she isn't nice at all. She's selfish, she's rude, she's sarcastic, but isn't it wonderful that she's her? Is what I started thinking today. And of course, Chris, it's nice that you're you. Huh? No one's ever said that to me before. I mean, everything's a first for me, but hearing it from you, it means a lot. I just wonder what being Ralsei like even is. Sorry, I got off track. Let's just enjoy the ride, Chris. So basically what he is saying here is that the reason why he looks that way in chapter 1 is because he was afraid. He was nervous to show his true face, his true appearance, out of fear of being rejected. He thought that if he showed who he really was, that he might not be accepted, or that they might prefer him looking another way, you know, like kind of like what a lot of people are doing in the actual community. And him taking off the hat is basically a way of him saying that he is finally starting to come out of his shell a little bit. He's starting to feel more confident, which is why it would make no sense at all, or it would only mean bad things for Ralsei's character if he was to put the hat back on in later chapters. And you can tell that, you know, or well, I guess you can tell, but this is the way that I interpret it, is that Toby Fox agrees, because if you try to talk to the hat rack who was holding Ralsei's hat from chapter 2, and I think, wait, no, that you didn't even go to the Dark World. You didn't even go to Castletown in chapter 3. In chapter 2, there's a hat rack character, and you can see Ralsei's hat on there, and if you talk to that same hat rack in chapter 4, Ralsei's hat is missing completely, which I think is basically Toby's way of saying that design isn't coming back. The way he looks now is the way he's going to look. Get used to it. Basically him saying that he doesn't care if you preferred his chapter 1 design. It wouldn't make any sense for his character for him to put it back on. So he said it in the most literal way possible by just throwing the hat away. I think the exact line is, the hat, it's like, sorry, Prince Ralsei, it appears that your original hat is gone forever. Weird how that is. It's fine though, you weren't gonna put it on anyways, right? That's not exactly what it said, but that's like the general gist. That is why I personally think that it wouldn't make any sense, nor would it be the right thing at all for Ralsei to put his hat back on in chapters after chapter 1, because it would basically, the only connotation that it can have for his character is negative ones, like character regression, basically. Like it would imply that he is starting to lose that confidence that he had gained throughout the story, and we don't want that, do we? You know, it would mean that he wants to hide that part of himself again, which, you know, from what we learn in chapter 3, there's a lot of things about Ralsei that he does not like, and his appearance and his face is one of the only things that he is actually proud of about himself, which is another reason why he wore the hat, is because it would suck if people didn't like the only thing that he liked about himself. Like, that would probably not be good. I think that the only way that I can see the Hat Ralsei design possibly coming back in a way that makes sense is in the weird route, because that is basically the evil route where you do all of the things that suck. But in terms of the main route of the game, the quote-unquote pacifist route, the one where we're friends with everybody, I just do not see a way where Ralsei's chapter 1 design could come back and it would mean any kind of positive thing for his character. I don't see a positive spin on it at all. Like, it was, him taking the hat off was too much of a significant moment in, basically, I would say, the start of Ralsei's true character arc, which is him sort of learning to accept himself as his own person with his own feelings, his own wants, his own opinions, desires, fears, whatever it may be. Him taking off his hat in chapter 1 was basically the beginning to that, the catalyst. It was something that needs to persist. I don't think it's something that can just be reversed. because it wouldn't work with where Ralsei's character is going and where the story is going for him. It just wouldn't work, basically. And the fact that I've seen people who understand that but don't really care, and they just want that design for him to come back anyways because they think he's cuter with the silly wizard's hat, is a little disheartening, and it just makes me feel like those people are not really evaluating the game or Ralsei's character in an honest way. They're not willing to put aside their biases of, preferring one character design over another, the most surface level reasoning, and just sort of ignoring all of the important character growth reasons that it is this way. That to me just feels like, those people don't really care that much about Ralsei as a character. And again, like I said, I'm not trying to bring the people who prefer Ralsei's Chapter 1 design down or make them feel bad for thinking that way. This is just sort of my take on it and why I think that it's just something that it wouldn't make sense, basically. Now I hope that I'm not upsetting anybody by being so definitive with my opinion here. I just wanted to sort of explain that, Ralsei is a very complicated character, a lot more complicated than I think some people give him credit for. And just based off a lot of the discussions that I see online regarding, hatted Ralsei versus non-hatted Ralsei, which one is better? Which one do you want to stay? And I see a lot of people to this day, 8 years after the first chapter coming out, saying that they still would prefer if his Chapter 1 design came back, not really thinking about it any deeper than that, not realizing that there is so much more to it than just a character design change. And that is what I tried to sort of say with this video. I don't know if I explained myself very well. I hope I didn't miss anything. Ralsei is obviously a character that I care about very, very deeply, almost too much probably. I'm very passionate about his character, and I have been seeing a lot of misconceptions about him in recent months, and I feel like it has actually kind of damaged his reputation a little bit. I see a lot of people putting him on the lowest in terms of popularity compared to the other main characters. He seems to be the least popular of the fun gang, the main characters. I've seen some rankings where he had a lower score than Lancer, and I just don't know how that happened, because I don't know, it just shocks me to see that there seems to be so many people who don't like Ralsei, and I think it's just because a lot of people don't understand him, and that's definitely it definitely saddens me. But anyways, that was me. That was my mostly unscripted rant about the ever popular discussion and, I guess, quote-unquote controversy surrounding Ralsei and his character design, and my sort of opinion on it, trying my best to be as not really objective with it, I guess, but just trying to give a more of an actual answer than just, I like his non-hatted design more. I think he's cuter. I try not to bring my opinion of the character design into this discussion at all, and I wanted to give more of an actual explanation as to why I think that there is a real story and character reason as to why, an actual writing reason as to why this would just not work. and that basically that design for Ralsei in Chapter 1 served its purpose and should just be left where it is, basically. Let it rest, basically. Like, before I end this video, I do want to announce, since it has been a little while, that I am working on a new Deltarune fan animation. Progress is going quite well, but it might still take a little while before it can come out. So please, please be blah, blah. I suppose I should also thank you guys for 500 subscribers. I did not think that I was going to reach a number like that on this channel this soon, let alone at all, to be honest. I didn't think that, you know, when I was making that first fan animation that I made a couple months ago now, before the story, I made it in like 2 days after watching one tutorial video, which is why it's definitely a little rough around the edges now. But, you know, this channel is just something that I whipped up real fast just so that I could have somewhere to post that, because I feel like it didn't belong in the other YouTube channels that I have made videos on. And it ended up working pretty well, I'd say. This channel has grown a lot faster than pretty much any other one that I've made. You know, it's crazy how many comments and likes and just interactions that the videos get despite being such a small channel. It's something that I'm not used to. Like, this is the first time in a long time that it feels like people actually care about the videos that I'm making and are actually watching it. And it's definitely really cool to see. And I've still got quite a lot of things that I would like to do in the future. So I hope that you will join me. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you thought, or if you agree with me, or if you think that it's not that deep, which it probably isn't, but it is to me. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.